Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you all with us today. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Just under an hour from now, SpaceX is set to launch the Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40 there at the Cape. Sun just coming up, so a little bit hazy there in the camera view, but so far things are progressing smoothly towards a non-time liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. We've seen some of the good pre-launch venting, and by all accounts, SpaceX is in a good position to launch today. Weather also cooperating for this launch, much better than it was for the outlook of an AX-4 launch, which of course was scheduled for today, now punting to no earlier than Wednesday, June 11th. We'll talk more about that as we continue on with the broadcast, but with this turn-based shot, you can see just a few cumulus clouds hanging around here on Florida's Space Coast, a little bit of a breeze in the air as well. As you can tell with the bushes in the foreground, the American flag in the background, a little bit of movement on the water as well. Otherwise, a beautiful morning for liftoff. Talk more about the forecast, but just broadly speaking, as that bird flies into the camera view, meteorologists suggest a 95% chance for favorable weather at the beginning of the launch opportunity today. So, good morning to fly a rocket. For the more than 700 of you who are with us live, appreciate you stopping by our coverage here at Spaceflight Now. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button, share the stream, allow us more folks to find their way to this live launch coverage. Also want to thank our moderator du jour, Callistia Lee, helping us out in the live chat today. You can help make her job and that of any of the other mods that cruise on in that much easier by refraining from delving into overt politics and religion, by typing in all cap or not typing in all caps, but conversing in English so that Callistia and our other mods can respond as appropriate. And most importantly, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. Just about 56 and a half minutes on the clock right now. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Our photographer out in Bernstein, out at the press site, got all these camera views that you've been seeing up and in focus, and he's getting ready to track the Falcon 9 as it takes flight from Pad 40 as well. If you're not following him and our other photographers, you can find their handles on X on the screen right now. Adam is at ABurn NYC. Michael Kane is at MD Kane Jr. John Pisani is at John Pisani Photo. And be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. And if you're not on X, you can also find us on Facebook, Threads, and Blue Sky. We'll also be joined with tracking assistance a little bit later on in the show by our friend Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, whose camera view you're taking a look at right now from a little further south on Merritt Island. Today's Falcon 9 flight set to be SpaceX's 71st of the year so far, and their 488th in total. As we're getting going today, I want to give a big shout to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube who make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, Lloyd Green, Debbie Lane, Joni Mahoney, Bubba Ray, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, And of course, the ability to watch our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space and spaceflight, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature like Joni did. And not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the countdown, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. So thanks to Joni, one of our channel members, for a $10 super chat, who says, "Morning Spaceflight Now, Will," in chat. Also want to thank our moderator and channel member, Callistia Lee, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, helping to grow our little community here on YouTube. Appreciate that, Callistia. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And if you haven't already, be sure to thank Callistia in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. As a reminder, anytime someone does gift memberships here on YouTube, it is entirely random to whom they are given. The giver, as well as us, we have no control over that randomization. So if you were just now gifted membership, congratulations, lucky you. Of course, it is just past 8 o'clock here on the East Coast, and so things are picking up as far as the workday here at the Kennedy Space Center. So as we continue on through our broadcast, you may hear some periodic announcements coming over the loudspeaker from the vehicle assembly building adjacent to where we are here at the press site. As I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, while today's mission, Starlink 12-24, is progressing as, of course, we are on the air in support of that coverage. The other mission for SpaceX that was scheduled for today, the Axiom Mission 4 flight, which was targeting a liftoff from Launch Complex 39A that you see here live on your screen, that was set to be at 8:22 a.m. So would have been in less than 10 minutes from now had that mission progressed. However, because of the weather outlook, the teams decided to stand down from a launch opportunity with that flight. High winds along the ascent corridor were in the risk assessment from the meteorologist at the 45th Weather Squadron listed as high on a scale of low to medium to high impact for launch. And obviously, for any human spaceflight endeavor, you need a good path for not only the rocket to make its ascension, but in the unlikely but still possible case of an off nominal scenario, an emergency along the ascent corridor, and the Dragon capsule needed to separate from the Falcon 9 upper stage, then you also need good recovery weather for the teams that are stationed along that ascent corridor as well, in order to allow them to respond safely and allow the crew to be recovered and saved in that scenario. So currently looking at a launch that is set up for tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern. Of course, we'll have robust live launch coverage for that starting at L-5. But in addition to the weather being a watch item, there's also been some work being done on the SpaceX side. Of course, this mission has seen a couple of delays related to the debut of the new Dragon spacecraft at the top of the Falcon 9 stack that you see here live on your screen at pad 39A. Currently unnamed as far as the public knowledge of what the future name of this Dragon will be, but it goes by the tail number C213. The Dragon capsule now ready to fly. Teams were busy yesterday and today getting the Falcon 9 booster ready, as there were a couple of issues that cropped up during the static fire test that happened on Sunday. Covered it live here on the YouTube channel. So thanks again to those of you who are with us for our live coverage. Channel members, you can watch all the angles of the static fire right now on the YouTube channel, but want to go now to some comments as we're just about 10 minutes away from the SpaceX launch director making the call on the start of prop load for today's Falcon 9 flight. Want to go to some comments from Bill Gerstenmaier, who is the vice president of build and flight reliability for SpaceX. He spoke during a post-launch readiness review teleconference with members of the press yesterday, and these were his opening remarks as far as the readiness of the Falcon booster that you see here on your screen, which is tail number B1094, which will be supporting not only the launch of AX4, but also, as we learned yesterday, the upcoming launch of NASA's Crew 11 mission to the International Space Station. So again, here is Bill Gerstenmaier with SpaceX.
Human spaceflight's really core to SpaceX's ultimate mission, and flying crew safely is always our top priority. Spaceflight is really hard, and we're learning every day. The more we fly, the more we learn. On Saturday, Dragon and Falcon rolled out, and we went vertical on the launch pad ahead of the teams participating in the rehearsal of launch day activities, as Alan talked about. Shortly, the dry dress was very successful. We completed the Falcon 9 static fire, but we discovered a few things during the static fire that we had to go take a look at. We found a LOX leak that we previously had seen on this booster during its entry on its last mission, and discovered that we had not fully repaired the booster during refurbishment, or we didn't find the leak and didn't get it corrected. We've now gone out to the launch pad. We're continuing to troubleshoot that. We should get that completed today, and we will have that back in configuration. And we're installing a purge that will essentially mitigate the leak if it still continues, if we see it on launch day. So we'll be fully ready to go fly. We also discovered an engine 5 thrust vector control problem, and we're going to change out the components associated with that. In fact, they're already changed out now. And we'll be complete with all our work this evening, and we'll be ready to support launch as early as tomorrow. Again, I think this shows the difficulty of getting ready. You can always be prepared, but doing the testing, doing the dry runs, doing the activities with the crew to make sure we are really ready is tremendously important, because we always learn something. This is the first flight for this Dragon capsule, and I can't think of a better way for this capsule to enter the fleet than by flying this international crew that was described by the others in this room. It's pretty special to see this new capsule fly this international crew. We've also made changes to the Dragon, and we've improved food processing and storage areas. We've improved the stair latch retention design. We changed several of the propulsion components to make them reliable and more reusable. So this isn't just the same Dragon capsule you've been flying. We've actually made some improvements and actually made it better to continue to keep flying safely. So far this year, SpaceX teams have flown 3 Dragon missions, 2 of which were human spaceflight missions, with all of them launching within 38 days of one another. And while we were working on those, the teams were also looking ahead and preparing for Axiom 4. So this is a very, very busy time for us. And I think one of the benefits of flying frequently and having a fleet of spacecraft is that it gives us the opportunity to review data regularly. And it allows us to look for data, look for small things, find things, improve things, and continue to fly safe. I think when you start assuming things are easy and you stop looking and you start just assuming things will go well, that's when trouble occurs. And we're not in that mode. We're continuing to learn and make sure that we're really ready to go fly. This will be the second flight for this Falcon 9 booster. It previously launched on a Starlink flight. This booster then will be turned around and used for the Crew 11 flight later this summer. Again, thanks to NASA, Axiom, and the partners on this mission, ESA, India, Poland, and Hungary, and thanks for their trust and close collaboration on this Axiom 4 mission.
And again, that was the voice of SpaceX's Bill Gerstenmaier, who is the vice president of build and flight reliability at SpaceX. Again, the AX-4 mission currently targeting a liftoff as things stand at this moment at 8 a.m. Eastern, 1200 UTC tomorrow. That is Wednesday, June 11th. There will be, of course, another evaluation of the weather outlook today, and teams will make an assessment on whether or not tomorrow is going to be a good enough outlook, especially along the ascent corridor for a launch. And so we'll continue to keep tabs on that, and be sure to head on over to our website, spaceflightnow.com, for the very latest on the launch of this mission. You can actually read a mission overview, get to learn a little bit more about the crew that's flying on board as well. Again, that's on our website, spaceflightnow.com. Time now on this Falcon 9 flight that we do have on tap for today. Starlink 12-24, currently just under 43 minutes to go ahead of the liftoff of this rocket. 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites are on board this Falcon flight, with 13 of them featuring direct-to-cell capabilities. Ahead of this mission, SpaceX has launched a total of 648 of these direct-to-cell Starlink satellites. Of those, 260 have been launched in 2025 alone. As SpaceX is getting ready to start the fueling process for its Falcon 9 rocket, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about the countdown timeline for today's mission and let you know the milestones that we're looking forward to ahead of a good liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Pad 40. Coming up at around the 38-minute mark is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good position, it can do this poll a little bit early, but broadly speaking, it's at the 38-minute mark when that begins. Tanking will start then at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene. That'll happen on the first and second stages of the Falcon 9 rocket. Liquid oxygen will flow on board the booster stage. That'll be followed up 5 minutes later by the loading of a cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Second stage comes up just a few minutes afterwards. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes before takeoff, the second stage RP-1 tank is full. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process gets underway. We see this visually manifest here at Pad 40 as the so-called big vent. That'll start at about T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds, lasting 4 minutes in total. And that sets up second stage liquid oxygen loading to begin at the 16-minute mark. Fast forward to T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines gets underway. That's when SpaceX begins to flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and that helps to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. At 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence get underway. That's when the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch in T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, coming up at 9:05 a.m. Eastern, 13:05 UTC for those around the world, or just a little less than 38.5 minutes from right now. As we continue on, tracking towards the start of fueling today, taking a look back here at the live chat. Want to thank a few folks for their support. Thanks to Andy Cochran for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Andy. It says, thanks for all you do to make these launches so accessible. Appreciate the kind words and the support. Also want to thank Joni Mahoney for gifting 5 Spacefly Now memberships, and to Chuck for gifting 20. So to our 25 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Joni and Chuck in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Appreciate that gift of generosity from the two of you. Also want to welcome a new channel member, Kenneth Bradley, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome to you, Kenneth. We're glad to have you with us. Today's Falcon 9 launch features the flight of Falcon Booster 1083 in the SpaceX fleet. Going to be going for its 12th flight today, so no movement to our list of Falcon Booster frequent flyers. Do like to check in on this, though, with our missions, just as a quick reminder of where SpaceX stands as far as its flight leaders for the Falcon fleet. The booster set to launch the AX-4 mission, also nowhere near this list. It's going to be flying for just its second time when it does take off in support of that mission to the International Space Station. So far, actually, the Fram-2 mission that we saw earlier this year is the most that Falcon first stage booster has flown in support of a crew mission that launched for a 6th time. Here's a look at where SpaceX stands on the year so far, launching 70 Falcon 9 rockets as of now in 2025, looking for number 71 today. Just under 35 minutes to go. At this point, SpaceX should be tanking its Falcon 9 rocket in support of today's launch. given the sun's position at this point in the morning. Not the easiest thing to determine the start of fueling, but we've got our tracking camera that is locked in on that position. So we're going to take a closer look here now at the base, the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Really hard to make out the lettering of SpaceX today, so not really a good reference point for you. But if you see that sort of thin tree with the pair of branches that's sort of jutting up to the right, sort of pointing towards the rocket, just off of the corner of, well, now it's blowing the opposite direction, but in that part of the rocket where those branches are pointing up towards the booster, if you look just to the right at the booster itself, it's right about at that point where we'll start to see frost line form and a little bit of vapor as well in that part of the rocket as super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the first stage of the Falcon 9. SpaceX typically doesn't denote the start of fueling for its Starlink missions anymore, so we are solely reliant on visual cues at this point to determine the start of fueling. Even with the sun being where it is, and we're struggling to see the start of tanking, we'll of course get our good visual indication when the big vent comes around at T minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. By then, there should be more than enough liquid oxygen flowing on board the booster, though, that we can pretty distinctly see the vapor that will be wrapping around the skin of the rocket. Well, thankfully, we don't have to wait until the big vent because we do believe we are starting to see that frost line begin to creep its way up the booster and just be able to make out a little bit of vapor as well, trailing off to the left of the rocket from our camera's vantage point now. So, with that good visual, we can confirm that fueling is now in motion on this Falcon 9 rocket and SpaceX locking into the current T0 of 9:05 a.m. Eastern, 13:05 UTC. Because SpaceX uses what's known as a load and go style of fueling, they are tanking the rocket up until the 2-minute mark ahead of flight. And so this vehicle does not have the ability to hold in the countdown process. So once fueling is underway, as the name suggests, they load and they gotta go. Now just about 31 minutes ahead of flight. With less than 29 minutes to go, if you're just now joining us, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the Starlink 12-24 mission, a flight of 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. Good to have you with us today. As you'll undoubtedly have noticed by now, of course, we did not have the launch of the AX-4 mission earlier this morning, and that's because weather was the deterring factor to flight. Recovery corridor has been problematic for a launch opportunity today, so currently teams are aiming for liftoff now from Pad 39A tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. on the dot, 1200 UTC, for the flight of 4 astronauts to the International Space Station. Taking a look at the payload that's on board this Falcon 9 rocket, as we mentioned, 23 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites, 13 of which feature direct-to-cell capabilities. Today's launch will be the 52nd flight, including Starlink satellites this year. These optimized versions of the Starlink satellite are considerably lighter than their predecessors, as you can see here by the difference in weight. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. Built up in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. These will be deployed at about 180 miles or 291 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. Just about 25 and a half minutes on the board left before this Falcon 9 rocket is ready to take flight. As I mentioned earlier in our coverage, this booster, tail number 1083 in the SpaceX fleet, set to launch for a 12th time today. Before that happens, though, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about its flight history, where it has been before we go ahead and see its upcoming next flight. As is the case with a number of Falcon 9 first stage boosters, this rocket began flying its port of a crew mission. That was the launch of Crew 8, which took off on the Dragon spacecraft known as Endeavour on March 4th of 2024. That was followed up by a pair of Starlink satellite missions. You had Starlink 6-48 on April 10th and 6-56 on May 8th. Followed up by another crew mission, this time a commercial astronaut fare. This was Polaris Dawn, which lifted off back on September 10th of last year on that free-flying mission using Dragon Resilience. One more Dragon flight for this booster on November 5th. That was a cargo flight, CRS-31, lifting off from Pad 39A to the International Space Station. The booster touching back down at Landing Zone 1. A couple more flights to close out 2024 for this booster. You had Starlink 6-65 on November 30th. And then just before the end of the year, December 29th, the Astronus from One to Many mission, sending those 4 satellites on their way to geostationary orbit. Coming into this year, our asterisk when we mention the Starlink total. So there have been 51 dedicated flights, as this mission today will be the 52nd flight of a batch of Starlink satellites, but Starlink 13-1 did include a couple of Starshield satellites. Following that, we had the launch of the IM-2 mission, the flight of Intuitive Machines' second Nova C class lander named Athena, or Addie for short. Then finally, had a couple more Starlink missions that'll bring us up to the present day. Starlink 12-17 on April 13th and Starlink 6-91 on May 10th. Coming up less than 23 minutes ahead of the flight of Starlink 12-24. Just around the bend, we'll see the so-called big vent as SpaceX begins to thermally condition the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. That venting will start at T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. And the start of the big vent now, as you see here on your screen, taking a look at the camera view from Chuck and Jen Briggs down on Merritt Island. Again, this venting will last about 4 minutes in total ahead of the start of second stage liquid oxygen load. Coming up on 17 and a half minutes ahead of flight today. As you can hear with all of the avian activity here at the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, it is a busy morning here for lots of things getting ready to take flight. This venting process is going to be wrapping up here in just a little more than 30 seconds. Second stage lock, so it'll begin at the 16-minute mark. And a good taper of the big vent. Less than 30 seconds to second stage lock load. With now 16 minutes left on the clock, second stage liquid oxygen load in work. Let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline now, the milestones that SpaceX is anticipating with a good flight of its Falcon 9 today. Of course, following liftoff of the rocket, the vehicle will throttle back for passage through max Q, which is the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. That'll happen in about T plus 1 minute and 10 seconds post liftoff. After throttling back up, then SpaceX will start to thermally condition the Merlin vacuum engine on the vehicle's second stage ahead of the start of its first burn. Post minute 2, we'll have a few events back to back to back. We'll see first stage manage a cutoff for MECO at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds into the mission. That'll be followed by stage separation about 3 seconds afterwards. And then the aforementioned Merlin vacuum engine will ignite for the start of its first burn at about T plus 2 minutes and 36 seconds. The payload fairings are set to deploy just past the 3-minute mark. A few minutes after that, the first stage entry burn will begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 1 second. Burn lasting about 26 seconds in total. Given the time of day and the brightness combined with the clouds, we'll be hard pressed to see the entry burn with our tracking cameras today, so more than likely we'll be relying on the SpaceX onboard cameras at that point. Moving on will be the start of the landing burn using just one of the Merlin engines, the center engine at the base of the booster. That'll set the vehicle up for a landing attempt on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions at about T plus 8 minutes and 12 seconds into the flight. After that, the upper stage engine will shut off, going into a coast phase then, which will last until T plus 53 minutes and 58 seconds. A quick 2-second burn to circularize the orbit is on tap at that point, which will set up the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 7 seconds today. Just about 13 and a half minutes to go now on this Falcon 9 rocket. Coming up next will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster. That's coming up at T minus 7 minutes. As we're approaching the point of liftoff today, I want to thank the more than 3,600 of you who are now watching live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button just beneath the video here and sharing the stream. That allows the YouTube algorithm to do its thing and bring some more folks to this live launch coverage, which would be greatly appreciated. Also want to thank Monkey Tree Rob for a $5 super chat, who says, perfect start of the day with a launch with Will and the small army of people on this chat. that make it all work flawless. Thank you. Never gets old. Thank you for the kind words, Rob. Good to see you this morning, and thanks for the support. And as we're now less than 12 and a half minutes to go before this Falcon 9 takes flight, let's take a moment and talk about the Falcon 9 rocket itself, the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. Today's mission, again, for those who were not here at the start of the broadcast, will be SpaceX's 488th Falcon 9 rocket launch to date in the 71st of 2025. Falcon 9 rocket is 70 meters or 229 feet in height and has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The majority of that is made up by the booster stage. Again, this is Falcon 9 first stage booster 1083, which will make its 12th flight to space and back today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, and that produces 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. Taking a look at that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVac engine. It's optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, which gives it that classic name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and today it will be fired twice prior to the deployment of those Starlink satellites up top. Like the first stage, the second stage of the Falcon 9 burns the same propellant mix, which is RP1 and LOX. Following the deployment of the Falcon 9, or the deployment of the Starlink satellites from the Falcon 9, a little more than an hour post liftoff, there will be one final burn of the upper stage engine, a deorbit burn, driving that part of the vehicle back into the atmosphere where it's designed to burn up and eliminate the risk of creating unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which are currently encapsulating the 23 Starlink V2 mini satellites. The fairing halves are 13.1 meters in height, 43 feet, in other words, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Following fairing separation, the halves will fall back through the atmosphere and then make their final journey down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. They will be scooped up by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, brought back through Port Canaveral, and then turned over to the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Just under 9 minutes to go ahead of this Falcon 9 launch today. Less than 2 until the start of that engine chill down sequence. Before we get our pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket, I want to take a moment to talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to be flying. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Falcon 9 rocket, after it lifts off from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, will be flying in a southeasterly trajectory. Rocket following that green arc that you see there on your screen. At stage separation, the booster will follow that red path you see there with booster landing targeting the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. Assuming a successful touchdown. This will be the 124th booster landing on that particular drone ship and the 460th booster landing to date. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort on scooping up those fairing halves and bringing them back into port. So it's an important part of their business model to get those back and fly them as often as possible. Like the booster stage, SpaceX is working to certify its fairing halves for up to 40 flights, with at least one fairing half having flown now for 30 times. Again, once those fairing halves are in the water, they'll be brought aboard a recovery vessel and then brought back into Port Canaveral. Just shy of 7 minutes now to flight. At this point, the engine shield-down sequence is underway. Coming up on the conclusion of RP-1 loading for the first stage. That tank should top off in just about 20 seconds from now. As we're getting right down to it, want to thank Mark Potocnik for a $2 super chat. Appreciate that support, Mark. Good to see you this morning. As we're getting close to just about 5 minutes before flight, see another one of our moderators, Aussie Space Girl, has also joined us today. Good to see you, Stephanie. Hope you're doing well down in Australia. So we've got JD Shemp checking in from Thailand, Rob Sprigg from Moscow, Idaho. Let us know where you're watching from today. So we've got Missouri in the house. Of course, plenty of folks here in Florida, Pennsylvania. Always good to see where our global audience is representing.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for strongback retract.
And as you just heard, and we'll momentarily see, we've got our mission audio for today as SpaceX is continuing to count down towards the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket there at pad 40. Bringing in those pad level views now, you can see the difference between our clock in the upper right hand corner of the screen and the SpaceX clock
Strong
there.
back retract has started.
Good call for a strong back retract. Soon the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, allowing the transporter erector to recline a few degrees away from the rocket. Going back to the comments about the countdown clock, our clock is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is on a slight delay. So as long as we've got tracking views from our cameras, we'll be making mission milestone callouts based off of real-time events until the point where we're relying solely on the SpaceX onboard cameras, of course. Just under 3 minutes. At this point, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full.
Stage 1 lock slot is complete.
Good call out there from SpaceX. We're awaiting a similar call now on second stage LOX load. That should come about around the 2 minute mark. Less than 2 minutes to go. Second stage LOX load should be full. Should hear a call on that momentarily.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing right now are the ground gas closeouts as SpaceX clears the liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad.
Ground gas closeouts.
And with that process complete and a good call out from SpaceX, we're just about a minute away from the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that, we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their call for the go for launch. Should be coming in the next few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And a good call out confirmation, less than 30 seconds now to go ahead of the flight of this Falcon 9. "15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 12-24 flight. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Nice little shot collar there as the Falcon 9 continues to climb. A little more than a minute into flight. The rocket will be throttling down to pass through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure. Passing through max Q.
Max Q.
SpaceX will next be thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Listen for the call for MVAC chill.
Stage 2 engine chill.
There's that good confirmation of that milestone. We're now coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. The payload fairings will be jettisoned just past the 3 minute mark, now more than 2 minutes into flight. Less than 5 seconds to
Falcon
MECO.
9 is following a nominal trajectory.
And there you see MECO. Stage separation. And second stage engine start. Some
MECO.
great tracking views.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 startup.
Good call outs, good visuals from SpaceX. A little bit hard to see the fairing deployment given the brightness. But you can see them glinting off the sun every now and again.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And a good view of those Starlink satellites, 13 of which feature direct-to-cell capabilities today. Coming up on 4 minutes into this mission on the SpaceX timeline of things. Again, because it is so bright, I would not expect us to be able to see the entry burn from our tracking cameras today, unfortunately. Looking for the start of that entry burn, though, at T plus 6 minutes and 1 second, or thereabouts. Entry burn today lasting roughly 26 seconds in total. Some really nice views off of the camera from the booster and the upper stage as well. You see the Florida coastline disappearing from the edge of the engine nozzle. The first stage booster now beginning to make its descent towards the drone ship. Just read the instructions. Those bursts that you're seeing in between the hypersonic grid fins, those are the cold gas thrusters, which help the booster maintain its correct positioning or its attitude. Nice little view of the sun peeking in through the inner stage at the top of the first stage booster. SpaceX will use 3 of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage in order to perform the entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Good call, good visuals for the start of entry burn.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown. Both vehicles are following nominal trajectories.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
A series of good callouts from SpaceX, last of which referencing the second stage's flight termination system, or FTS. We're coming up to the start of the landing burn here, and now less than a minute away. That will use just one of the engines, the center engine on the booster, to make that final touchdown on the drone ship.
Stage 1 transonic.
First stage now traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 2 terminal guidance. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 shutdown.
And with that call for a second stage engine shutdown, presumably the upper stage entered into a nominal parking orbit. Assuming that, there will be a coast phase now that will last until about T plus 53 minutes and 58 seconds. That'll set up a quick 2-second burn of the upper stage engine, circularizing the orbit. And then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 7 seconds post liftoff. Back here watching the strong back as it'll go up right here momentarily. Getting our replays ready for you in just a moment, but let's go ahead and step through the mission stats as they currently stand with a good liftoff and landing of that first stage booster. That marked the conclusion of the 12th flight of B-1083 in the SpaceX fleet. This was SpaceX's 488th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 71st of the year so far. This was their 426th Falcon booster reflight, with the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 145th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 257th orbital flight from Pad 40, and the 312th orbital launch from Pad 40 overall. Here's a look at where the bar chart currently stands for the Falcon family of rockets. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 124th landing of a booster on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. That marked the 371st drone ship landing for SpaceX and the 460th overall booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, today's mission was the 49th orbital flight from Florida so far in 2025. This was the 75th launch from U.S. soil, the 82nd from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 127th orbital launch attempt around the globe. So far, there have still just been 3 launch failures on the year so far, and here's where our pie chart currently stands. As those launch replays are ready, want to take a look back at our live chat here. Thank our friend Charles Boyer for a very generous $20 super chat. Charles, of course, the man behind Talk of Titusville, uh, important local publication here on the Space Coast, keeping tabs on things, primarily, of course, as the name suggests, up in Titusville, one of the northernmost municipalities here in Brevard County, but also tracking things regarding space and space flight and impacting Central Florida as well. So thanks for the super chat, Charles. Good to see you this morning. Who says, as always, the timely launch information and overall coverage are simply excellent. Great job, Spaceflight Now team. Thank you, Charles. Again, thanks for the hard work you do with Talk of Titusville. As a reminder, SpaceX still readying the launch of the AX-4 mission alongside, of course, Axiom Space, which is the company behind this flight, this private astronaut mission, getting ready to fly to the International Space Station. Currently targeting liftoff on Wednesday, May 11th. That is at 8 a.m. Eastern, 1200 UTC for those joining around the world. As I speak, just taking a look at the 45th Weather Squadron's page, and a new launch weather forecast has been published for tomorrow's launch opportunity. The liftoff conditions are currently described as 85% favorable for liftoff tomorrow, with potential violations from the cumulus cloud rule and the flight through precipitation rule, as was thought to be the case yesterday. As far as the ascent corridor recovery weather, as opposed to today, where conditions were a high risk, tomorrow is considered a moderate risk on that scale of low to moderate to high. As meteorologists had forecast, the conditions for the recovery corridor weather do improve as the days go by, with 24-hour backup on Thursday improving from a moderate risk to somewhere between low to moderate, with a 75% chance for favorable weather at liftoff. If SpaceX and Axiom Space need to punt from Wednesday to Thursday, and Thursday is no good if they need to punt to Friday, Friday's forecast is basically identical to Thursday. 75% chance for favorable weather, same risk criteria, same impact along the ascent recovery corridor, tracking between low to moderate risk. Here at Spaceflight Now, we'll have live coverage of the AX-4 mission whenever they are ready to launch. That begins at L-5 hours. Do have our launch replays ready for you, so let's go ahead and bring those in before we wrap things up, starting with the fixed view from the press site here as arranged by our Adam Bernstein. We'll hear more audio from the rocket's liftoff in these later clips. Of course, the visuals come to us much faster than the audio does, so it takes a little bit for the sound to travel from the pad a few miles out to us here at the press site. Moving on to the turn basin view, one of my favorite views. Moving on to the tracking view from Chuck and Jen Briggs down on Merritt Island. Moving on to the tracking views from Peak Karstens. And one last view from our tracking camera here at the press site. And with that, we're going to go ahead and begin to wrap up our live launch coverage today. Appreciate those of you who have been with us throughout the duration. Want to thank our moderators in the live chat, Callistia Lee, Aussie Space Girl, Rick Donner, joining us as well, Mark Otto as well. Got a good bit of the gang here today. Appreciate all of you for helping out in the live chat. I also want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, as well as Pete Karstens with Max Key Productions for their assistance in tracking the Falcon 9 rocket. Also to our Adam Bernstein for setting up all the camera views around the press site for today's launch. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We're very glad you decided to join us here at Spaceflight Now for live coverage of the Starlink 12-24 mission, and we look forward to welcoming you back here, hopefully tomorrow in the early morning hours as we cover the flight of AX-4 from Historic Launch Complex 39A. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.